The human child was born into heat and noise long before he understood words. The workshop was his world, a place of roaring furnaces, grinding gears and metal screams that never frightened him. Other children cried when sparks flew or flames leapt too high, but he only watched with wide, curious eyes, as if fire was an old friend welcoming him home. He learned to crawl across oil-stained floors and slept beneath work tables, while machines cooled and men argued about broken parts and failed designs. No one knew where he came from, only that he had appeared one storm-filled night wrapped in a blanket to clean for the district and left at the door without a name. As he grew, the workers noticed strange things about the boy. Metal never cut him, heat never blistered his skin, and when engines failed they often started again when his small hands touched them. People laughed at first, calling it luck or coincidence, but the laughter faded as the years passed. Broken machines seemed to wait for him, gears aligned under his fingers, and damaged cores stabilized when he leaned close, listening, as if the machines spoke a language only he could hear. He smelled of smoke and iron, and something warmer, something ancient, that no one could explain. When sparks jumped, they curved toward him instead of away, and when fire flared, it bent low, as if bowing. The older mechanics exchanged uneasy glances and whispered warnings to keep him away from the larger furnaces, but even then, flames never harmed him. At night, he dreamed of wings stretching across a red sky, of stone halls glowing with embers, and a woman standing tall and terrible upon a throne of fire, her eyes searching, her voice calling softly though he never understood the words. He woke with his heart racing and his hands warm as if they still held flame. He never knew why machines trusted him or why fire felt safe. He only knew the workshop felt too small. As he grew older, and the dreams came more often, each one pulling him toward something beyond metal and oil, beyond gears and grease, and though he could not yet name it, destiny had already wrapped itself around his life, like smoke rising from a forge, shaping him quietly, patiently waiting for the moment when fire and truth would finally mate. As the boy grew taller, his hands grew steadier, and his reputation spread beyond the workshop. Machines others had abandoned were dragged to his bench. Engines that had seized and cracked were brought to him as a last hope, and somehow they always answered his touch. He did not force metal into obedience. He listened, he rested his palm against cold steel, and waited, and slowly the machines seemed to breathe again. Gears slid into place and power flowed where there had been silence. People began to watch him differently, fear mixing with wonder. When sparks leaped, they spiraled instead of scattering, and when heat rose, it wrapped around him without harm. His skin warmed but never burned, and his eyes reflected firelight like polished bronze. Some said he carried blessing, others whispered curse, and mothers pulled their children away when he passed. The boy himself did not understand. He only felt calm when surrounded by engines and flame, as if the noise settled something restless inside him. When machines failed, he felt it like a knot in his chest, and when they came alive again, relief washed through him, like cooling steel quenched in water. At night, his dreams sharpened. The woman of fire stood closer now, her wings vast and folded behind her, her eyes no longer searching but aching, as if she had lost something precious. The boy woke with her voice echoing in his ears, though no words formed, only feeling, longing, grief, and recognition. One evening, a massive war engine was rolled into the yard. Its core shattered and its frame twisted. The masters declared it dead, but the boy stepped forward without fear. He laid his hands against the fractured metal, and heat surged around him, the air shimmering. As workers staggered back, the machine roared to life, whole and obedient, and in that moment silence fell. The elders exchanged glances, heavy with fear, because what they had hoped was coincidence was no longer deniable, and they realized the child of oil and fire was becoming something the world was not ready to understand. Questions followed him like shadows as the boy grew older and braver. He asked the elders where he came from and why fire listened to him, but every time the room fell silent and eyes turned away, answers were replaced with warnings spoken low and sharp. Never ask again, never look toward the mountains, never follow the dreams that pull you into the sky. The boy noticed how voices changed when Dragonlands were mentioned, how hands tightened and faces paled. Stories of burning cities and vanished armies filled the taverns, and the elders spoke of dragons as if they were storms, given flesh forces that could not be reasoned with, only survived. Yet every time he heard those stories, something inside him stirred. Not fear but familiarity, as if the tales described a place he had once known. At night the dreams grew stronger. He saw vast stone halls glowing with ember-light banners, hanging heavy with ash, and fire dragons coiled along walls like living statues. The woman of flame stood at the center, her crown forged of molten gold, her expression torn between fury and sorrow. When she looked at him, recognition flashed in her eyes, and the boy woke, shaking his hands warm and glowing faintly in the dark. One night, he followed the elders' voices into a back room and heard his name spoken with regret and fear. They spoke of an agreement made long ago, of a child hidden for safety, of dragon blood too dangerous to remain. The boy stood frozen, as truth settled into his bones, like heat into metal. He did not confront them, he did not scream or run. Instead, he returned to his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant roar of furnaces and the even more distant echo of wings in his mind. By morning, the boy understood something fundamental. The workshop had raised him, but it was not where he belonged, and whatever truth lay beyond the mountains was calling him with a voice he could no longer ignore. The night, the sky roared. The boy knew sleep would never come. Thunder rolled without, clouds, and the air burned hot, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The furnaces dimmed and machines fell silent. One by one, as though listening, the boy stepped outside and lifted his face to the stars, and then it came, a sound so deep it shook bone and blood, a dragon cry, tearing across the heavens. The force of it drove him to his knees. Heat surged through his veins, not painful but overwhelming, like a forge stoked to suddenly. His heart thundered and his vision blurred, and within his chest something ancient stirred and stretched, as if waking from a long sleep. Memories not his own pressed forward, wings slicing through smoke, fire rolling across stone. A woman screaming his name with a grief that shattered worlds. The ground vibrated beneath him. Sparks leaped from nearby chimneys, bending toward his body. Instead of away, flames flickered and bowed, and the workers who had followed him watched in terror as the boy rose, surrounded by heat that did not touch him. His eyes reflected the red of distant fire, and for a heartbeat, the shape of wings shimmered behind him before fading into night. When the roar faded, silence crashed down heavier than sound. The boy stood trembling, not from fear but from certainty. He knew without doubt that the call had been meant for him, that the sky itself had spoken and demanded an answer. He returned to the workshop and gathered his tools, hands steady despite the fire in his blood. No one tried to stop him, no one spoke. They only watched with the same fear and awe, reserved for storms and gods. As dawn broke over the city, the boy stepped onto the road, leading toward the mountains, the air growing warmer with every step, and behind him, the workshop doors closed softly, as if sealing the end of one life and the beginning of another that had been waiting since the moment fire first learned his name. He walked without looking back, carrying only his tools and the certainty burning in his chest. The road toward the mountains stretched long and cracked beneath his boots, the air growing hotter with every mile. Fields turned to ash and stone, and the sky darkened with drifting smoke. Yet he did not slow his pace. His dreams guided him at night, showing paths through broken land and warning him of dangers before they appeared. Creatures fled when he passed, sensing something older and stronger than fear. Travelers who crossed his path felt heat rippled through the air and stepped aside in silence. Some bowed without knowing why, others whispered prayers as he moved on. Each night he slept beneath open sky, the stars blurred by rising heat, and in his dreams wings beat closer than ever. The woman of fire, no longer distant, now standing just beyond reach, her voice no longer mournful but urgent, calling him forward. His hands grew warmer with each sunrise, metal softened beneath his touch, and his breath steamed even in cool wind. He realized his tools were changing to edges, glowing faintly when he held them, as if responding to the blood in his veins. By the time the mountains rose before him, black and jagged against the sky, he understood that he was no longer simply a mechanic child. He was a traveler between worlds, shaped by fire and purpose, and whatever waited beyond those peaks had been waiting for him just as long. The mountains loomed higher with every step, their black stone veins glowing faintly with heat, as if fire flowed beneath the surface. The air thickened and shimmered, and breathing felt like drawing warmth straight into the lungs. Yet the boy did not falter. His pulse matched the rhythm of the land, slow and powerful, as if the mountains themselves recognized him. At the gates of the dragon realm, jagged spires of obsidian rose from molten rock, forming an arch that burned with living flame. Dragons circled overhead, their shadows sweeping across the ground like storms waiting to strike. Guards raised weapons forged for killing beasts of fire. Yet none moved when the boy approached. The flames parted for him like curtains drawn aside, and the heat bent away from his skinny. Roar thundered across the gate, and dragon poured down, engulfing him in blinding light. Those watching cried out expecting ash, but when the fire cleared, the boy stood, untouched, smoke curling lazily around his boots. The dragons fell silent, wings folding in disbelief, ancient eyes narrowing with recognition older than language. He walked forward through halls carved from stone and flame walls, etched with histories written in scorch marks, and clawed. The heat grew stronger yet felt comforting, like a hearth after long travel, and with each step, memories returned, not as visions but as knowing. He knew these halls, he knew the sound of wings against vaulted ceilings, and the way firelight danced along banners of Ashat, the heart of the stronghold. The throne room opened vast and towering, a river of lava flowed behind a seat carved from obsidian, and bone upon it sat the dragon queen, her crown a living halo of flame, her posture rigid as if holding together something long broken. She lifted her head slowly, and the moment her eyes met the boy, a tremor passed through her, fire flickered, her breath caught in grief flashed across her face before she could hide it. The air itself seemed to still, as mother and child faced one another across the molten floor, bound by blood, memory, and a destiny that had waited in fire and silence for far too long. The boy stepped forward, his boots ringing against the obsidian floor, the heat of the lava behind him brushing his skin but not burning him, each step heavier than the last yet filled with certainty. His chest thrummed with a rhythm older than any drum. His eyes locked on the dragon queen, and he saw something he had never expected, recognition breaking through grief, shock, and awe all at once. Her eyes widened as if seeing him for the first time, and then she saw what she had never dared hope. The shape of him, the curve of his hands, the warmth in his gaze, a reflection of herself hidden across years and distance. She lifted a hand, trembling, as if the effort to reach him might shatter her entirely. The throne room seemed to shrink around them, fire and shadows dancing against walls, heavy with history. As silence fell so deep, even the lava hissed in respect. The dragons around her, wings folded quietly, their massive eyes fixed upon the child who carried both fearlessness and something older, something they had only felt in legends. The boy raised his own hand instinctively, brushing the chain of a tool belt across his chest, feeling the strange weight of inheritance and belonging he had always sensed but never understood until this moment. The queen stepped down from the throne, moving slowly, as if each footfall might undo the years that had passed. She stopped just before him, and her breath caught, her lips trembling, as she whispered words she had never thought she would say, "My son," and the sound carried across the hall like molten gold. The boy felt it reverberate through his chest, through his bones, and for a heartbeat, everything else vanished, leaving only recognition and love finally answered, and a bond that could not be denied. The dragons stirred softly, wings brushing against the walls, the throne room alive with heat and awe, and for the first time the boy understood. He was more than a mechanic, more than a wanderer. He was the heir of two worlds, human hands and dragon blood intertwined forever. Tears ran down the dragon queen's face, unbidden and unstoppable, like rivers of molten gold spilling over stone. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the boy, and the weight of years and loss and hope pressed into every trembling line of her face. The throne room seemed to bend around them, firelight catching her crown, and the flickering glow of lava painting both of them in warmth and sorrow. Boy took a step forward, hesitant, yet drawn as if invisible threads tugged him toward her. His hands brushed the edges of his tool belt across his chest, feeling the strange pulse of inheritance and belonging. The dragons around them lowered their heads, wings folding softly in reverence, and Oshi reached out, trembling, her fingers brushing against his cheek, and the touch was gentle and fierce at once, like the brush of flame against cool stone, a connection spanning years and worlds, all converging in that single heartbeat. Her voice cracked, breaking the silence, and she could only whisper, "My son," and the words hung heavy in the air, and the boy felt them settle inside him, as if they had been waiting for this moment since the first sparks of fire had awakened in his blood. He reached for her, trembling, his hands warm and alive, and pressed closer, feeling the truth of her grief and joy mingling with his own relief and wonder. The heat of the room pressed in but did not burn them, and for the first time in his life, he understood the depth of the bond they shared. The necklace of tools and fire in his chest seemed to thrum with life. The dragons shifted softly behind them, their eyes reflecting the emotion in the hall, and for a long moment, nothing moved except the slow, steady flow of tears and warmth, and the quiet acceptance that what had been lost was finally found, and love that had waited in silence was at last returned. They closed the distance between them slowly, at first, then with a pull stronger than anything the boy had ever felt. The Dragon Queen wrapped her arms around him, and the heat of her body mingled with the warmth of the lava, and the boy felt a lifetime of longing and separation dissolve in that single heartbeat. He pressed his forehead against hers, and for a moment, the world outside the throne room vanished. Nothing moved except their breaths, mingling, and the quiet thrum of fire and blood flowing together. The dragon shifted softly behind them, wings brushing the walls in reverence and awe, as if honoring the bond that had been restored. The boy lifted his hands and touched her face, hands small and human yet alive with inherited power and recognition, and she closed her eyes, pressing closer, feeling the connection that had always existed despite distance and silence. The words, "my son," repeated in her mind and heart over and over, and he felt their weight settle inside him, not as command but as belonging, as truth, as love. Around them the throne room shimmered with heat and light shadows, dancing across obsidian walls and molten floors. The necklace of tools on his chest glimmered faintly, as if acknowledging the union of worlds, human and dragon, past and present intertwined. They stepped back slightly, still holding each other, eyes locked, the queen smiling through tears. The boy returning it, feeling completeness and purpose coursing through his veins. For the first time, he understood who he was and where he belonged, a bridge between fire and metal, between human sweat and dragon blood, a living bond that would shape the future. And in that moment, the Dragon Queen whispered again softly, this time steady and certain, "My son." And the boy smiled, knowing that every step, every trial, every spark of fire and oil had led to this reunion that nothing would ever tear apart, and love that had waited so long had finally found its home.